An honest old friend, a very old song, a flask of old porn that fit the night long. A flask of old porn that fit the night long. Laugh at the anger, those who repine. Laugh at the anger, those who repine. They must drink porter, while I can drink wine. They must drink porter, while I can drink wine. Well, the water beneath the sky is what caught my eye. The sense of eternity, breeze blowing off the sea, blowing by.
Elizabethtown, specifically the Borough of Elizabeth, maintained schools since the 1600s, but it was in 1750 that the first public schoolhouse was built in the village of Wheatsheaf. Wheatsheaf at this time was District Number 1 of Elizabethtown and comprises parts of Linden City and Roselle Borough today. The schoolhouse measured 16 by 20 feet and the ceiling reached 7 feet high. A hole was cut in the center of its roof for a passage pipe, which underneath laid a notorious wood-burning stove. The stove heated the students in the cold of winter, as well as instilled a bit of terror into would-be mischievous pupils. At this first area schoolhouse, the favorite punishment allotted by proctors was to send the student to cut loads of wood for the stove. This was seen as wholesome exercise, and as the joke goes, descendants of the students of Wheatsheaf remain of full muscular development today. Tiger style. The Wheatsheaf Tavern, one of 3 listed by cartographers in Elizabethtown at the time of the Revolution, was built in 1745 on the border of today's Borough of Roselle and city of Linden. This was a main rural center and namesake of the area of Elizabethtown, named the village of, or sometimes the hamlet of, Wheatsheaf, and served as the center for the greater Wheatsheaf neighborhood. The history of the small hamlet goes back to the 1740s. It was a coach stop along the road to Rahway, as well as the tavern being a mail depot for the village and rural area, a meeting house for official business, and central socializing locale for most of the Linden and Roselle area, which is in addition to Elizabeth proper, as many families went downtown as well. This was a major farming area with several clinker lots, homesteaders, and large tracts farmed by families like the Woods, Hetfields, Morrises, Marshes, Winans, parts of the Ogden's estate. Later in the late 17th century, coming from Long Island, the Clarks, whose progeny, Abraham Clark, signer of the Declaration of Independence, has built up a large farm down the road a quarter mile or so with his acreage adjacent to the tavern on both sides of King George's Road. That road is now St. George's Highway, Route 27, a road General Washington took on his way to his inauguration in New York City in 1789, passing right past this tavern. Washington had sent letters during the War of Independence in recognition of the sacrifices and steadfast resolve of the men of this then Elizabethtown neighborhood, patriots who endured the struggle on what was the front line for the majority of the war. Though we had uncovered these letters years before the project had started, they are no longer posted on the online collection, but we hope to share copies with you after a trip to the Library of Congress. The Wheatsheaf Tavern would serve as the official meeting hall for the Township of Linden a little more than a century after its beginnings.
On the bloody field at Monmouth flashed the guns of Greene and Wayne, fiercely roared the tide of...
The small hamlet of Wheatsheaf was the center of a large rural neighborhood of Elizabethtown, the Wheatsheaf neighborhood. This neighborhood sprawled through most of what is Linden today, including the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 6th Ward. Linden's oldest building, the John and Abigail Woodhouse, stands today in the 6th Ward on the main street bearing their name. This Georgian-style farmhouse has been continually inhabited for 350 years. The current structure dates back to 1770, built upon the foundation John II's grandfather laid for his house back in 1702. We believe the original structure likely burned down, as that was common in this era. Incidentally, John's grandfather, Samuel Wood, was one of, if not the first child born to the settlers founding the Elizabethtown tract back in 1665, possibly making this member of an original Linden family the first New Jerseyan. John II and his 17-year-old son at the time of the Revolution were staunch patriots. John II and/or his son fought under the command of storied heroes like Lieutenant John Kenny, Lieutenant Francis Barber, and Captain Nathaniel Bowman as part of the 3rd Regiment of New Jersey commanded by Elias Dayton. The records are unclear whether this service was by John or his son, or by both. That said, this building surviving the conflict while so many patriot homes along the front lines were ruthlessly burned by Tory raiders makes it a true treasure of the city of Linden.
And the army loved her well. Swords the roar of battle round them swiftly flew the ardent hail. Forward dashed 1,000 bayonets that lone battery to assail. From the foeman's